Well, when you're a child, you think that everybody is Jewish. So it comes as a rude awakening when you're 4 or 5 years old and you discover that not only is everyone not Jewish, but most of the people around you aren't Jewish as well. Yet, that said, I grew up on the Lower East Side. I went to Wayne School, East Junior High, and East High School, and I was the only Jew in the school. I experienced complete acceptance. Most people knew I was Jewish. I didn't wear it on my sleeve. I didn't wear a Star of David on my sleeve. But most people knew I was Jewish. And I was, and all my friends, and it was very well accepted around, especially around the holidays. There was a lot of understanding. The race-related issues and the civil rights movement didn't really fire up again until about the mid-'60s. I was already out of school. I was actually out of the Navy at that point, and I was working for the newspaper when the civil rights movement really hit full stride. Probably in the mid '60s, and I got to be a part of that. With my job in the newspapers as well. In 1967, we had first what was called racial unrest in Erie, but there were riots, there were fires going on every night, especially during the summer. And as a young cub reporter at the time, I got beat up pretty badly at one of those incidents. And I made my way back to the newspaper, and the editor made me write the story, a first-person story about it. But what it did is give me an awakening of why I had to get beaten up and why I was disliked so much and hated so much by people who I didn't even know. So I really made it my goal as a reporter then to get into the community, get into the African American community, and find out what was going on and why it was going on, and that was a rude awakening for me as well. There are a lot of similarities because of the anti-Semitism, of course, that would go on, and there has always been support over the decades of the Jewish community for the African American community all over the country. Our former rabbi, recent rabbi who just passed away, Leonard Livshin, actually marched on the Selma Montgomery marches, 3 of them with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So he was up in front with him when that happened. That's what we had at that time, going back that far. A lot of people don't realize who live in Erie, but there was redlining going on in the 1940s and in the 1950s, and African Americans could only live in certain neighborhoods. They weren't allowed to go beyond, say, for instance, 5th Street on the east side, south of 5th Street on the east side. They were redlined, to that district. They were restricted in some ways of they can go into a restaurant or a soda fountain downtown. They can get in there, they can sit at the counter, but they were never served. And I've written a lot of stories about that in my time as well. Just as Jews at that time, my father, for instance, there were clubs that my father could not belong to because of the restrictions, and Jews were not allowed in those clubs, whether it was a social club or whether it was a country club. Well, that's the climate that this country has been in the last few years. It's a separation climate. It's not a united climate, it's a separation climate, and there's almost like 2 Americas. And yes, we've, unfortunately, the Jewish community has to have armed guards at all of our religious services, on Shabbat and our high holidays, and whenever we get together to pray. Both congregations in Erie have armed guards at all their services. What we've seen as far as the African American community is that it finally got to the point where there was enough is enough. We see this. Every human being who lives in the country, in the United States, who's a thinking person, can see what has been happening, and including just recently, just the other day, and with African Americans, and finally said enough is enough. And the Jewish community has been very supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, and will continue to be supportive of that movement. Now, nobody supports looting and rioting and fires. Do we support peaceful protests like the silent march that was in Erie in June? You know, absolutely. And we will do everything we can to support that. We're all in this together. And whether you're black or whether you're Jewish or whether you're Islam, we're all Americans, and we need to be together in this. That's a great question because, and I heard this, I was a speaker at Edinburgh University several months ago, and one of the college students there asked me that same question, and I really could not answer it. Usually when I hear something anti-Semitic from someone, I ask the person if somebody Jewish did do something really bad to you or your life or your family, have they, are you, and usually people can't give me an answer. So I don't know that answer either. The Jews have always been part of their communities, as they've been a part of Erie community for well over 100 years. They've been not only merchants up and down State Street and up and down Parade Street, but also they've been in the legal profession, the medical profession, journalism. Two managing editors of Erie's two newspapers were Jewish. When we had the greatest jurist, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Sam Roberts, was Jewish, and we still celebrate his life with the scholarship that the Bar Association gives out every year. So we've been a vital part. The Jews have been a vital part of the Erie community for decades and decades and decades. Why does this anti-Semitism keep rearing its ugly head? Well, again, I can't answer that, but I suppose a lot of it is because of absolute ignorance. Education is probably the key word. Now, the Jewish Community Council of Erie is now focused on education and primarily on Holocaust education. And what we've done is we've already sent hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 students in Erie public schools and parochial high schools on buses to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. We picked up all the cost for that. It's a life-changing experience for these students to do that. There's also Holocaust studies going on in the schools today that had never happened before, because in our lifetimes, while many people, survivors, are still alive from the Holocaust, and it happened in my lifetime, there are deniers out there. Right now, there are deniers out there. So what's going to happen a few years ago when those people who bore witness to the Holocaust, when they're all gone? What's going to happen then? So we felt it is imperative that we continue the Holocaust education. Of course, what they do at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington is a lot more cerebral and easy to understand than how I'm explaining it to you. But we are focusing on Holocaust education and awareness. And if there's ever, instead of being silent and sitting back when there's something anti-Semitic that occurs, we speak out. We don't remain silent anymore.